Hello everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today I am joined by two special brothers, Avi Fishoff and Dovi Fishoff, in honor of the release of a brand new book about their amazing father, Reb Benny Fishoff. Thank you, Avi. Thank you, Dovi. It's an honor to sit with you.
Thank you.
And we are very excited here in ArtScroll land with the release of this new book about your father. I know that this is really many years in the making. It's what's unique about it, which I want to get into first. First of all, kudos to the author, Rabbi Moshe Sherer, who's a master at his craft and took your father's story and brought it to life in such a beautiful way. But what's unique about it is that it's written, for the most part, as a memoir in first person. Mm-hmm. Talk about that evolution and how that happened and why the book evolved that way.
Well, my father always wanted to memorialize his life, which was very, very unique as a survivor from Lodz, from Poland, traveling through Russia to get to Shanghai and then settling in America, really a lone survivor, and built his family and his friends and his whole social life totally on his own. He wanted to convey that to the next generation. He always felt, and he has spoken about it many times in speeches, about how he felt that the reason that he survived was to teach the next generation, to kind of be a bridge for the next generation about what pre-war Poland and pre-war Europe was all about. And he felt that that was one of his missions in life. So he wanted to convey that, and in addition to that, to give over his experiences in life and in business to his children, and primarily to his children and his grandchildren, for them to know what he was about, what he felt was important, and what he had learned from his family, from his ancestry.
So am I understanding correctly that when the book was originally commissioned to be written, it was really written for the family?
Yeah, totally.
Totally, for the children, the grandchildren, kind of a legacy book.
Yes. Yeah.
And at what point did you decide, you know what, this story has so many lessons and so many there are so many compelling reasons to share it with the wider public. Well, at what point did you decide that was the case?
Well, my father was Kanai Nahara. He wasn't a young man, but he was very, very healthy. He was totally with it, physically, mentally, until the day he got sick, which was in 2016, December 2016. He just one morning he had internal bleeding and he didn't wake up. But until that point, he was vibrant, he was well, and he was working on the book himself for quite a few years with Shirley. Mm-hmm. And he loved Shirley, and I think the feeling was very mutual. So I think the book goes well beyond the, just a verbal interchange between the two, but there was a lot of emotion in the book, the way my father wrote it, the way Shirley wrote it, the way he conveyed it. But my father was really just gearing it for the family, and he told a lot of private stories inside the book that even some of them we had to take out eventually. But when he got sick, we started thinking about maybe this is the time for other people to get involved and to see how other people's experiences and perspectives corroborated what my father stood for and what was important to him. And the way his life's lessons, actually, he conveyed that to other people, and he practiced very much what he preached.
I think that above all, it says it's a story of dignity, generosity, wisdom, and warmth. Well, more than anything, actually, that I found, and I'm wondering how this impacted you as children, was his humility. He was a person who seemed to be able to relate to every person, no matter who they were, from young to old, from prominent to not so prominent. He had that endearing characteristic of humility. What did you see at home? Because that at least on a public persona, we saw that humility. What did you see at home, Rabbi Avi?
So I think he was always shocked that he was important. And he came here without anything, without anyone, and he did the right things, and Hashem benched him, and he had a lot of chen, and he had a lot of midas that normal people don't have, which I hope we'll get into. He really had like a whole different way of looking at things. I didn't even realize it till much later in my life, that things that we take for granted, that we would never do or never think of, that other people do and think. They didn't have a role model. So he really had a really high road, just internal way of dealing with everything.
Can you give a practical example of that? What's an example of something that
so many of those
that he did that was so different than the Hamaynam?
First of all, he just genuinely liked people. So he was interested in, he didn't have anything like, oh, he's younger than me, he's older than me. He just liked people. And he was very trustworthy, very trustworthy. He really didn't put himself before any situation, so he really didn't have an agenda. He was very, very clear-minded. That's why so many people trusted him in so many issues and making peace between families and all of that. And many, many, many stories about that are in the book, and it's just endless. Even after the book came out, so many people are texting us so many more and more and more stories. But it comes to that humility, really, I think my personal belief is he couldn't believe that a little kid from Poland, could end up being in a new world with a new language and a new culture, could end up being really in the 60s and 70s, Klal Yisrael was much smaller, and he was really very prominent. And that's why every time that he was asked to speak or asked to do, he always said, me?
Moi?
Moi?
He said, moi? Couldn't believe that somebody gave him an honor of something or asked his advice.
He was really
something
shocked.
important in very important issues in Klal Yisrael.
And also you see his tremendous positivity. He was an extremely positive person throughout the book, and I've seen videos of him. He was always talking about the future and what Klal Yisrael could do and what we're going to accomplish. He wasn't wallowing in the past, which he really lived through what we would consider the worst period for Klal Yisrael in the last century, and he lived through it as a child. And he came
I think there
over
are two elements to what you're saying, really. First of all, in terms of his history, he didn't focus on the past so much. He always had it in mind, but his focus was the future. And even in terms of day-to-day life, in business and in other things, in askanas, whatever it was, everything was positive. Everything had a positive spin on it. And I was zeichet to work with him for 10 years in the office together, day by day. And no matter what happened in business, he would always see the silver lining. We learned this lesson, and we got this, and we benefited this way. He just had an incredible positive attitude about everything that was going on in his life. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, that was his motto that he got when he got the bracha from the Imrei Emes, as you could see in the book, when he was just gezegening with the Imrei Emes in Poland. And he lived that way throughout his life. Everything was a positive spin on things.
Yeah, I think beyond anything else in the book, I think just that alone, if people take that to learn from Reb Benny Fishoff, is that ability to, first of all, to carry on, despite whatever has happened in the past.
Incredible.
And to do so with such an ayin tova and like you said, a love of people, which is not so simple.
No.
Not so simple. People don't always love people,
He loved everybody.
Yeah,
it's even
it's
even deeper than that. It's that we think that you'll be nice to people, they'll be nice to you, and everything will be fine.
like a quid pro quo, right?
Right? And as long as you're nice, it's good. But unfortunately, the world is not like that. And while he was really nice to everybody, there were people who really hurt him very badly along the years. Friends of his and people close to him who did really bad stuff to him. And that's where the angel part really popped out, where we couldn't believe how he would, how do you even explain it?
The way he reacted to those people was so dramatic. Many of the people don't even realize that he had a tain on him, that they did anything wrong to him, and they feel they're close friends with him. And we know the truth from the inside. We knew what happened, and we knew how he felt. But he was so positive in his relationship with them, and so warm to them that they totally either forgot what they did, or ignored what they did, or felt that he didn't care. He just loved everybody. He just couldn't help himself.
It was incredible, and people really stabbed him in the back, and then he would see them, and we would be like, oh my gosh, and he would just go over and give a big hug, and it's like he had this kind of I don't even know what to call it, but you don't get the reputation that he had if you don't also deal not just being good to everybody, but also responding to people who are not good to you.
Right.
In this way, which was l'mala miderech hateva. I mean, I don't think anybody else has ever seen anything like it.
Just to add to that, he had many opportunities. Unfortunately, they could get involved going to din Torahs, getting involved in litigation. He put all that aside. He said, that's not where I want to spend my time and my energy on the past. Whatever it is, it is. I want to focus on the future and not worry about what happened in the past. He just
I was going to ask you, where do you think he got that? Where did he get that from? Who was his primary role model? Who he modeled his personal character after? That it was so sterling. What would you say?
What was so unique about him is that everybody that could have been a role model really was killed in the Holocaust, and he was really alone.
He was a young boy.
He was an at
16, 17 years old. He was already totally alone.
That's what makes this so much more astounding.
Right. He was a role model.
Yeah.
Would you say he was self-made in that sense? Just a self-made man?
I guess Hashem blessed him to have a certain way of life. I don't know anybody that he got this from. And
he said a very interesting thing, Tchunas HaNefesh.
Yeah.
Somebody in ArtScroll told me his son was involved in the Knesset. And when my father came to the room, there was like some kind of gathering, a Gera gathering. And obviously my father was, one of the prominent chassidim in Ger. And he comes into the room and he sits in the back. As if they're not going to tell him, sit in the front. To him, he was comfortable in the back. And the fellow told me, and I can't remember his name right now, the fellow told me, I told my son that, you're going to be a Chaver Knesset. Look at how Mr. Fishoff deals with people. Look how he conducts himself. Such an important person. Don't lose focus of where you come from and who you were. Don't think that you're unimportant. You want to learn from somebody. Mr. Fishoff is your role model. Mm-hmm. And then he mentioned about Tchunas HaNefesh. He said, your father was a person that every good Tchunas HaNefesh in a person was rolled up into your father. Mm-hmm. Every good, just natural tchuna that a person could have was rolled up into your father. I remember his expression like that.
Tchunas HaNefesh,
very special.
Rebbe, his son-in-law called me to tell me that he needed to collect money for something new. And he said, we're starting off now to collect money, which is a difficult process for anybody. You wait online. In those days, you would knock on the door in the office and sit, and people nice to you, not nice to you, whatever. He said, the first person we're going to go is to Benny Fishoff. He says, because he's beteva agita. His nature is good, and he says, and I'm talking about from Shanghai, before he was anybody and before he had any money. Mm-hmm. He says, beteva agita, so let's start with him, we'll have a good feeling.
Wow.
And my father would walk with people who were 30, 40, 50 years younger than him and be buddy-buddy with them. And we saw this everywhere, but especially in Ger. I mean, my youngest memories growing up, it was just incredible how many people loved him and came over to him. And there was no difference, someone his age, someone 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years younger than him. And he would sit and talk to them, and so many of them consider themselves his friend.
I'll tell you a good story about that. My wife has a cousin from England, from London, came over to me after the P'tira. Maybe he was still sick. And he was in Ger with my father. He was talking to my father. He's today maybe 35 years old. As myself 5 years ago, at least. He was 30 years old. He was talking to my father in Ger. And somebody calls my father over that it's time you have to go into some kind of meeting, whatever. And my father says to the person who called me, says, excuse me, I'm talking to my friend. And I get emotional thinking about it. The young man says, he called me his friend. It's not like he said, I'm busy, I'm talking to someone. Right. The fact that he called him his friend just meant so much to that young man. Wow. And he had that ability with so many different people.
It's so moving. But to add on what you were saying about the Knesset member, I think we could all take a lesson from his life as well regarding success. Very often people think that in order to get places, in business, in haskanas, whatever it is, even for great things in Avodas HaKodesh, sometimes you have to push your way around, and then be a little aggressive. Sometimes, you step on people if you have to, but that's just that's the path to success. And your father showed us that totally not the case.
Opposite.
The exact opposite.
Be machnia
to everyone. Exactly. He acquired the ultimate Taim Shem.
And even financially, people want to do business with someone like him. And the sharks or the people who are tough, everybody knows who they are. Mm-hmm. So they gain in the short term, but in the long term, they're no Benny Fishoff.
And I'll add one other thing. Very often people who are viewed as nice and soft and humble are people who are not so involved. And it's easy to stay a nice person when you're not so involved because you don't have to do uncomfortable things. But like one of you alluded to before about him getting involved in mediating. people who were fighting cats and dogs. And your father, the book describes
tremendous.
how he got involved. He was able to bring people together, b'shalom, when they hadn't spoken
Were you in Vegas?
so long.
Were you at the CES show?
Yeah,
I was
which one?
there.
Which one?
There were two people who were fighting over millions and millions of dollars. And he knew both of them. And they already spent like $500,000 each on lawyers. And we're talking about 30 years ago.
Wow.
So that's like,
At least.
yeah, so it's like spending $10 million now on lawyers, right? And they were at each other's throat. They were really, really fighting. And we went to the CES show together. I saw it happen. I was just walking with him. And he pulled over the one guy, and he just like, holds him like this, and he's like walking with him, and he's like, this, and whatever. And so what do you want? What do you this, whatever? And he said, okay. Then he went over to the other guy, right, and he sat with him, and he says, what are you fighting? What is it you want? What do you think you're going to get? It's going to cost so much on lawyers. And then, like, within an hour, they were both sitting at a table outside at the same table, just the two of them and my father. My father pulled out a napkin, took out a pen, and on the napkin wrote up the agreement that they both signed.
And that was one of the easier cases. I would say my father was relentless in helping people. Relentless. We have many stories. You know the story.
We were traveling.
There are many stories. I went once with my father to a Sony convention in Hawaii. And in those days, you didn't fly directly to Hawaii from New York. We stopped in Chicago and LA. Every stop, he went into the phone booth and called the people that he was working on. In Chicago, then in LA, and then half the time in Hawaii, he spent, instead of spending on business, he spent on the phone with this issue. And he eventually solved it. It took him over a year. And it was an emotional disagreement in a family. And he just got it done. And he was never satisfied. He said, the only way I'm happy is if at the end of the day, both sides send me flowers. Then I know I did a good job. And he was very, very successful at that.
I spoke to a mediator, and he told me, he said, listen, when I mediate, I want to make sure that each one is equally unhappy. That's a good mediation. Because with my father, somehow, each side ended up happy. I was in the office when Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky, Shlita Zayin Gesund, he came in, and him and Daddy were mediating about a shul in South America, that there was some fight over the shul, and it was pretty intense, and they picked my father, and Reb Shmuel was there, and Reb Shmuel was like enjoying the way Daddy was like dealing with it, and so calm, let's have a pastrami sandwich, let's sit down. And
he was like Shlomo HaMelech when it came to these things.
It was unbelievable.
He knew what to say to each person to make them feel better about their tinus, how to take away the tinus. And sometimes it was just a matter of words. Like I remember talking to my father once, and he told me what he told this guy and this, that. And I said, he bought that? Like you expressed it in a different way. He was looking for, it was a divorce case, and he wanted the ring, and he wanted the money. They were exchanging things. And my father said what he needed to hear in order to feel better, that somebody understands him, and that he, in a way, is getting what he needs. And he made it work. One time there was a dispute people came to our office, and there were lawyers inside, and my father was working as an arbitrator mediator. And the lawyer walks out of the office, he comes to my desk, and he says, I don't know how your father takes this. I can't take it. I'm getting paid for this, and I can't take it anymore. I don't know how he does it.
There were Dvar Mayotzim and Alev. That's what it was.
He was respected
came from a real
by
place,
people.
right?
People, they felt comfortable with him because they knew that he meant the MS. He was just trying to help them. He wasn't doing it for the money. He wasn't looking for litigation. And they respected his opinion about what's right and what's not right.
He was very good at picking up, even in a huge battle, at what the nakuda of this person really cares about. And sometimes it was money, and sometimes it was really not money, and sometimes they felt whatever it was. So he was able to give each person what they really needed and find a way to make that work in a way that many professionals and other people couldn't do. That's why they ended up by him, which was interesting. It's not like now where a person decides to be an arbitrator and you have a business card. He wasn't officially anything.
Right. He wasn't trained in this, right?
He wasn't trained, and he didn't advertise, and he didn't. Just people ended up knowing that if there's someone to go to who will listen to you and will care about you and will work for you for free, that was the person to go to.
And it wasn't just regular people, I must say. Rabbi Moshe Sherer, as we bring in the book, Rabbi Moshe Sherer called my father the malach Shalom. Whenever he had a difficult case, he would summon my father to help with certain Chaver Knesset or Moyatzis Gedolei HaTorah members, whatever issue he had, extremely sensitive and delicate and had to be handled just the right way. He knew he'd call my father in. And not only just because my father was available, I was once with my father on a trip. My brother-in-law got married in Switzerland. Rabbi Moshe Sherer called my father from ArtScroll and said, I need you here. And my father took off on the vacation. My mother was there, Aleh Shalom. She was there with us. He left for 2 days, and he solved the problem among the Chaver Knesset in ArtScroll. He was just brilliant at this.
I was going to say that most disputes at the end of the day have to do more about ego than anything else. But
Very
because
often.
your father had no ego, basically, because it was never about himself.
Right.
You read story after story, it's never about himself. He didn't care about his own
Even
comfort.
when
He
it
didn't
was
care
with
about his own
him,
standing.
even when he was the Baldover, he still, I mean, it was really not about himself.
No, I
it's
think
about-
it was worse when he was the Baldover. We would we would look in the office.
Yeah.
Somebody would come for help to my father's office, and they weren't always the most upstanding people, in business, and not necessarily totally honest or reliable. But they would talk to my father, and I literally could see his face transforming to become that person that needs the help. He went from trying to help somebody else to trying to help himself.
Yeah.
He felt so much for the other person's problem that he put his own interests aside, and really sometimes it was detrimental to the business, but that person had to be helped. Now, I saw his face change. It was just incredible to watch. And we walked out of there, and like I said, oh no, here we go again. He was just unstoppable in trying to help people. He just loved people.
For sure, that a lot of times people would be like, okay, so this person has a problem. And like Dovi's saying, and there's one story, I can't really give too many details. You could write a book on just the story.
There are many stories that we can't give a lot of detail.
Which, there was a family that stole a lot of money from a bank. And they were going to go to jail, and they were going to lose their money. And my father was very close to the bank, so the banker came into my father and said, "You know this and this person," and he was very close to this person. And they came to my father to try to settle it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my father settled it, that for much less money and no jail time and and then they didn't have the cash. So he himself, my father, decided that he will raise the money. He didn't have the money. He borrowed money at 10%.
No.
He borrowed at 10%.
But he laid it out. He laid it out.
He borrowed for himself money.
And this
10%.
was Friday afternoon. He settled at the bank. I remember him coming back to the office.
Yeah.
It was time to go home for Shabbos already. And I said to my father, I said, you did an amazing thing for this person. You helped him so much. You relieved him of all his obligations. But he has a lot of friends. Why did you have to give him all the money yourself? So he said, I wanted the mitzvah for myself. And it was a lot of money. And it was an old friend. It was just incredible. The attitude was not, I saved him, let's get together the money.
Right.
I want to do it myself.
After you left, so I was there alone in the office, and it was really one of the few times that I was like in this type of mode. And he had his hands like on the desk like this. You never saw him like that, right? He was like this. And he said, imagine what a schus I have. He said, look at this family. They have children, they have grandchildren, they have kids learning in kollel, they have a very chashuva part of their family, Rosh Hashivas and whatever. And they were going to go to jail. They were going to face, jail time, literally, and lose all their money and have nothing. He said, what a schus that I have now going into Shabbos, that I was able to make the deal and give them the money. This was probably the happiest moment of his life. Someone who wants to give.
Wow.
He couldn't imagine of anything more to feel good for himself than, he said, now they can go into Shabbos ruyig, calmly, because their whole family is saved. They're going to be able to keep their business, which was going to be destroyed. They were giving the bank much less than what they owed, which didn't make any sense. All because my father knew the right person. And he said, and I was the one to come up with the money, and he didn't have it. He borrowed it at 10% interest.
It's wild. It's really...
It's unheard of. It's
really
unnecessary.
But the money thing is not something that everybody can do. Right. But the ahava and the goodwill that he had for people in wanting to help them and trying to help them.
Should we say the end of the story?
No, we shouldn't.
Can't say the end of the story.
We shouldn't.
But it was very sad and
tragic. It was
tragic.
an incredible story.
But as your father was doing these things, he was the consummate vatron. He was mavater to everyone.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was the relationship like between your father and your mother at home? What did you observe in terms of your mother being there for your father? You know,
She
in his
passed away
Avodas
when I
HaKodesh.
was. She got sick when I was 16 and passed away when I was 18.
Well, my mother, growing up, maybe a little before Avi's time, my father used to travel a tremendous amount. And in those days, traveling to Japan, he was away 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks at a time.
No cell phone.
No cell phones.
No WhatsApp.
Because he had to go. It took almost a week to get there, and he did a
Right.
lot of business in the Far East. He had a factory there at one time, developing, manufacturing electronics. But he worked with Sony and Panasonic in those days. In those days, they were big names. Today, it's like Apple and Samsung today, I guess. But he was away for weeks at a time in the Far East and in South America. So the burden really was very much on my mother. She was very much an Ezer Kenegdai. But when my father was home, after the office, very often he was in our Aguda meeting. He came home late for dinner because he had to be at the Aguda meetings. But he worked all the time building his business, Sundays and whenever. He was he was a very busy person. To give the time, I was always marveling at the fact that he would go to an Aguda meeting 6 o'clock in the afternoon, 6, 7 o'clock, and come home 9 o'clock at night. Because he was really, he was a very hard worker. He spent a lot of time out of the house. But when he was home, he was very consistent. I have a memory in my mind when I was maybe 11 years old. I remember I was going to yeshiva to daven every day. And one day my mother wakes up, and I woke up early, and she sees me at the back door leaving the house. Where are you going? I said, I'm going to shul. Because my father's not in town now. He's not able to go to shul, so I want to take his place. Because he was extremely consistent. I think one of his most important qualities in his life was his consistency and dedication to doing something. From the day he started Daf Yomi, which was somewhere, I think, in the early 80s, maybe late 70s, that he started learning Daf Yomi. So he was in Miami. He had a good friend, Chaim Hertz, who said, you know, I'm going to learn the Daf. Why don't you join me? From that day, he did not miss a Daf until my mother's Petira. And he wrote down during the Shiva, not allowed to learn. He had to skip these few blot. That's how consistent he was. When he did something, he was totally in control. The discipline that he had to wake up every morning. He woke up, you know, with the right schedule. Everything was exactly according to schedule.
I think also that he was really always in a good mood. Like if you're working very hard and you come to an Aguda meeting or something like that, whatever you're involved with, a shul meeting or any kind of function or helping people, you would feel like, you know, tired and run down. And then if someone's hacking you a chainik and not making sense, you'd be like, you know, you get nervous. Sure. I never saw him get nervous with anybody or be short-tempered ever. And he brought to the table just a good vibe.
Yeah, I think he was the life of the party in most places. Our house was, growing up, it was the center of gravity in Forest Hills. Everybody came over, we would sing, and we would schmooze with people all the time. The shul was around the corner from my house. It would take about 25 minutes to get home because he was
had to stop to
enjoying everybody's schmoozing with him, all his friends. He
Walking
had a
home,
very good
most of my life, we always walked home together. I don't know today, I don't know if kids would do that.
Yeah, we used to walk home.
But I remember like millions of times as, you know, coming home as I was growing up, I kept on saying, walk and talk, walk and talk. Somehow, whenever they would start talking, they would stop.
Stay in the corner for 10 minutes.
And I would be
you
like,
were a restless
we're freezing.
I wanted to go home. And I don't know why I couldn't go a half a block home before him, but we walk in together. And I would like, you know, gently, walk and talk, walk and talk. And he would just like, they would just talk and schmooze at the corner. Once they got to the corner where they had to separate, it would be another 20 minutes. He was a very friendly person.
Right.
And
he had a lot to say for himself.
Right.
He could...
Even under stress, very, very calm. And I think that's why people liked him, but he was very trustworthy. Rabbi Moshe Sherer always said that when he needed somebody that he can trust to be a representative, and in those days there was there was a lot of things going on. You know, there was the break-off between Degel HaTorah when Rav Shach
created the party, right.
He broke off from the Aguda. So before they broke off, both sides chose two people to try to make peace. One from Europe and one from America. And the one from America was my father. And he flew to Israel, and he worked there for about a week. And when he left, there was a heskam in place. They had a contract that they would not break off. Everything was in place. And that's why he left. And he came home
And when they chose him, he probably said, like, moi?
Me? Why would they choose me?
Yeah, why did they choose
That
me?
was a constant thing. Like, when Moshe Sherer asked him to speak at a simcha, he'd be like,
Yes.
me? Like, why would he ask me? I'm
Rabbi
like,
Moshe Sherer, when he made a family simcha, he had one MC, Reb Chaskell Shalom, and one speaker, my father. At many of their simchas. And every time my father said, me? I can't believe
when
you
they
choosing
wanted to
me
honor him,
speak."
me? So they chose him, and he was always, I can't believe it, me. By the time I entered, teenagehood, he was Benny Fishoff. He was a big name.
Right.
He still didn't chop that.
Uh-huh.
So like when he would say, like, why would they give me?
He never took himself seriously,
Right, no,
basically.
he couldn't believe it. He'd be like me, and I would be like, because you're the guy now. Like, to myself, I'd be like, because who else should they do? And he just was always in shock. So he went to Israel, and he made peace when he left. Wow. And I was at home when rebellious Sveis at Salmai Rosh Yeshiva called to speak to my father to let him know that at the end of the day that they decided to split. But that was the level. But it wasn't just things that nobody can do. It was in shul, it was with friends. I see a lot of people when there's sometimes friction. People like to egg people on sometimes. There's certain geschmack out of like making oh, he hurt you this way, he hurt you that way. My father was always the center of gravity, the center of peace, and he no matter what, from little to big.
He was the one that made peace. And
Always.
he kept everybody together.
Always.
They're a very interesting crowd, a Labor crowd, and he was the
different
one.
types after the war, Hungarian and Polish, whatever. He was the glue. And when he saw somebody insulted or he saw whatever, he always right away jumped to be matzik the other person and to try to work it out and that's something like we all have to try to do and we all try to do. He was successful at it, and I think there's a reason for it. I remember that there was a story with Reb Aaron Leib Steinman Zatzal, and he was like 90 years old, and they say that a certain yeshiva, a younger man, he asked him, he said, I don't understand. I speak more clear, and I speak more vibrant, and I'm a more powerful speaker, and I prepare much more. How come that when the yeshiva speaks, it's so well received, and when I speak, it's like not. And the Shaman basically said, because you're preparing for an hour, and I prepared for 90 years. And so it wasn't just, it's when you're that person, then what you say, and when you really mean it, he made a lot of things happen that are on the high road and derech shalom for lots of people. And that's how we had the reputation that people would even think to go to him. So the way that you live your life really allows other people to feel comfortable that you can help them with their issues, with their problems, and trust you. So when you say the same thing that maybe somebody else would say, they'll actually trust you and absorb it. It was one time that two people came in arguing over a small amount of money, and my father solved that case very easily. He just took the money out of his pocket and he paid it.
More than once. That was another way to solve problems.
He was very good at helping people because he really wanted to help people. He cared about helping people.
Right.
And
He enjoyed helping people.
Loved
he
it.
enjoyed it.
loved it, absolutely.
There was nothing more
Yeah,
important to him when a younger man would start off in business. We didn't get to that aspect of it. How
Right.
many
To help-
stories I've heard.
To help people get off the ground.
Oh
Loved
my
it.
gosh, he was.
Yeah,
he
you
just
got a kick
enjoyed
out
that.
of it, basically.
There are a
Loved
couple
it.
of stories, I think, in the book, but there are so many stories. People came over to us. I would say since my father got sick, Kimat, there's not a week gone by. We're talking about now 7 years. Kimat, not a week has gone by that somebody didn't come over to me somewhere in the world, whether it's in Europe, in Israel, in the States, in Canada, wherever it is, in South America, in Japan, in Dubai. Somebody mentioned to me how my father made them feel so good, how much they miss him. People I didn't even realize have shaykhs. Literally, a fellow from Dubai, he's an Arab fellow, Muslim fellow, lived in London, was in electronics business. He called me up about a year and a half ago. I miss your father so much. Your father was such a gentleman. I came to America and he treated me. I was much younger than him. This guy is today about 50. We're talking about maybe then he was 25 at that time. And, not a Jewish fellow in the electronics business. He met with my father. My father offered him a ride to the airport. He said, I live in Queens anyway. I'll take you to the airport. Like he couldn't believe it. And then on the way to the airport, my father says, let's maybe we could do some business. Or what would you propose? So he said, well, you're going to pay? So he says, if you ship the goods, of course I'll pay you. Pay you right away. And they did. They ended up doing business. But it wasn't the business. He was in love with my father. A fellow from Paraguay, right? Roberto Ugarte. Nobody knows him. He's not a Jewish fellow. A real gentleman, happens to be a very well-bred fellow in Paraguay. my father was like a second father to him. We're talking about these kind of people, non-Jewish. I have to tell you a story about a fellow around 1995. We had an office on 6th Avenue and 44th Street. I used to park in the garage. For many years, I parked a couple of blocks away because I leased a parking lot, and it was my parking lot, so I parked for free about 3 blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
Then my lease was up. I started parking in the garage next to the office where my father had gone for years. Anyway, I'm parking every day. One day, the fellow in the garage says to me, I had given my father a ride home the day before. He said, I see you with Mr. Fishoff. You know him? I said, it's my father. He said, he's your father? He's my best friend. This fellow, a young
The parking attendant.
Mexican parking attendant in the garage. He's my best friend. I said, what do you mean he's your best friend? I went up to my father. My father had stopped taking a car to the office about 6 years before that. He used to park in the garage every day. Then he got a driver when he got remarried. After my mother passed away, he got remarried. He got a driver mostly for Sherry. And they used to drive him to the office. He was hardly in the garage. 5, 6 years later, this guy says, Mr. Fishoff is my best friend. I went upstairs to the office and said, what did you do to him that he thinks he's your best friend? My father says I was always nice. Christmas time, I gave him a bottle of whiskey or something. That's the effect that he had on people.
When I went back to Florida, the guy behind the counter, his name is Benji, and he's from the Caribbean or something like that. And I told him, that my father's not well, and we see him from time to time, and my friends were with me. He started tearing up, like literally, and he said, I always felt so connected to him because Benji, we have the same name, Ben, and he started like giving a hesped about my father. And he's talking about the guy who works at the front desk. You walk out.
We're in the Carriage Club.
In the Carriage Club.
Unbelievable.
You walk out, you walk in.
Say hello.
You say hi, you
Right.
say not. Everyone does that. Like, what happened? And he started saying, he says, your father was different than everybody else. And I'm like, and I was with my friends and with my son. I said, what? And he said he loved everybody. The way he looked at this guy, he felt a difference than, it wasn't just like walking out and give the guy a tip or say goodnight, coldly. He just felt, he said, he cared about me. And he just knew that my father cared about him, and my father probably cared about him to the extent that if he probably went to my father and said, listen, I'm down on my luck and I need money, $5,000, $10,000, my father probably would have given it to him because my father really liked people. And he liked people who even when they didn't deserve to be liked. And even people who hurt him in the past and they came to him again. So many stories like that. And I'm like, and when we were there, it was like, like the last loan he didn't pay back.
Why are you doing it again?
Doing it again.
There are 2 things about that. First of all, when somebody new came to the office, even if my father just got hurt somehow in a business deal or a loan or anything, it was a clean slate. It's like my father never lent anybody money before in his life. It was just like, this guy has a cheshbon, he needs help, we're going to help him. There was no such thing as what he was worried about in the past. The second, I forgot what I was going to say. The second
Even
point.
the person himself didn't do it.
Oh, that's the second thing.
Yeah.
We invested sometimes with certain people in real estate. When an investment went bad,
A lot of different.
my father insisted to invest with him again. He didn't want that person to feel bad that he lost the money for us.
Wow.
So he would reinvest the money
With
with
the
that
same
person
person.
again, just to make sure, chas v'shalom, he shouldn't think that my father has some kind of time on him.
Yeah, not the best business acumen, but the midas were
No,
absolutely
it was
incredible.
overflowing
Absolutely
with emotion.
extraordinary.
He was overflowing with love for people.
But he
just
wasn't,
wanted to help.
just to understand, he wasn't like this extremely emotional, loving, hugging, mushy person in that thing. He just had it inside, internally wanted to help people as much as humanly possible and to be there for them. The story of a waitress.
Oh my gosh. I met that waitress.
You want to say that story?
He was in Miami. There was a waitress there. Somehow, I don't remember the details. He found out that she was a single mother and she was making a bar mitzvah. Anyway, he left her a small tip, I think $1,200. He paid for her bar mitzvah. So as a postscript, I went with my wife to Miami 2 years ago in a different restaurant, and there was a woman there, and she's a gioris, this woman. She looks like she's from South America or from Mexico or something, and she was a Gioris. And I see this woman at a restaurant. She looks like she's a waitress, but she looks like she's wearing a sheitel. I wasn't quite sure. And then I heard she went over to another table, and she said a couple of Hebrew words. And I'm thinking, like, what are the odds? We're in Miami, right? I didn't hear from this woman for 5 years. I don't know what happened to her. That restaurant closed up. There's millions of people in Miami. Must be dreaming. Anyway, sure enough, I come to pay the bill. She sees my name on the credit card. She comes over to our table, and she starts crying how she misses my father and how much she loved him. And she was so special. She thought about him every day, and she davened for him when she was sick, when he was sick. It was just...
And it was that
waitress. Just mamish, one in a million. I just happened to get her table. And it's just incredible, the love that people had for him. But it's not only people like him. I got to tell you, tip? Not that kind of tip. It's a lovely young lady. But when my father was sick, there's a young boy in Luxor who was roughly, at the time my father got sick, about 7 or 8 years old. He said Tehillim for my father every day. He's not related to us. But when my father used to walk home from shul, they had a home in the same section that we had, and my father would walk him home from shul. And he would talk to the boy, how's yeshiva and how's camp, and the boy said, I feel like he's my grandfather. Mm-hmm. And he davened for him every day, and a 7 or 8 year old boy for years was saying Tehillim for my father. That's like one after the other. Every person he related to, I used to watch him, and we used to watch him in Luxor. He gave out the lollipops to the kids. Every kid he would enjoy, he would smile. If the kid said a cute line or a good excuse why he needed a second lollipop, like he thought he was fooling my father. My father he just loved every one of them.
One of your father's expressions of his love and his passion, which I just wanted to address briefly, was his music.
Oh, yes.
He was a very musical person.
Right.
He loved music. He composed music. Talk about that, because I'm sure that music played a very prominent role in the Fishoff home.
Very much so, very much so. You could say you're the music
And
guy.
Rabavi is the music
He's
maven.
the music
So
Well, he's much more musical. Dovi's being humble.
No.
Much more talented and much more musical.
But actually, he's not a very honest person. So take it with a grain of salt. No, we grew up with music. First of all, my father actually played piano for Shlomo Carlebach.
Let's go back to lunch.
Let's go back. We should go back to lunch.
go back to
Further.
lunch.
We'll start from Europe.
Lunch, yeah.
as a child,
As
he
a child,
He's
It's
saying
brought down in the
Yeah.
book. My grandfather, his father, Dov Barrett, there was a local choir. And my father, even though they davened in the Gerish Stiebel, but they signed my father up for a local choir. And in that choir, they taught the boys how to read music.
and read and write music.
Read and write music, correct. And then when he was in Vilna with the Moshe Rebbe, he had transcribed a lot of the songs,
Mojits
the
and Nigunim.
the Mojits and Nigunim on notes, which we still have. It's really very unique to have that.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought him over with him, and he learned the
Mojits and Nigunim
Nusach.
are not like short
yeah,
little songs.
they're complex.
They're complex songs,
Complex
and he
Nigunim.
wrote out all the...
Before Ben Zion Schenker was Mojits,
Correct,
there was actually
correct.
Mojits and Nigunim from the Rebbe's. And my father wrote them out, and we used to practice them every year. And when we came to Nuschos, my father we would practice Rosh Hashanah. My father was about Tefillah also.
Right.
He davened Yom Neroim. And only many years later he found out that his family was killed actually on Yom Kippur, and he actually would
Right, the
would
book
daven.
talks about
We
which
talk
day.
about,
Which day he would keep the
Right,
yard
and
side.
he was actually about tefillah on Yom Kippur.
Mm-hmm.
Shachris.
And we used to go over the different nuschos. He knew the difference between a Ger Nusach and Satmar and Munkach and Mojits. He davened mostly Mojits and Nusach. And that's how we grew up. But there was always singing in our house, reviewing those Nigunim and reviewing the Nusach and reviewing all kinds of Nigunim in our house whenever a new song came out. And we had a very good group in shul. We sing with harmonies. And my father was the central man for everything.
Right,
He was the
right,
point
right.
man for everything, for all the practicing. And that's how we grew up. Singing was a very big part of our lives.
It's a different quality. People can sing, people can write notes, but to compose is a totally different part of your brain,
Right.
totally different experience. And he wrote a lot of Nigunim. And what was incredible is that he wrote a Gerenigan, they call it Kelodin, which when they sing it before Matzah Menucha on the first night of Slichas, which is called a Kelodin. They sing it throughout the year for Shachris Kelodin, and it's long. It's like 12, 13 minutes, 5 parts to it. as
And they sing it in Ger?
they sing this Kela, and in Ger, they say, Dus darf man kennen. Like, it's not just, it's the way it starts, the way it ends. It's like really a symphony.
Was it ever professionally recorded?
So I did it, I worked on it for him, and I had a Ger choir come into my studio that I used to have, a music studio.
Right.
And I surprised him with it, that I did the music, and I had the Ger choir come to this song that he really put together over many, many years. When did he start? It must have taken like 30, 40 years until he actually, completed this whole...
He put it all together, but he had different ideas here and there.
Right.
To him, it was a tremendous accomplishment, because in Ger, they have Ger composers. There was Yankel Talmud, then there was Leibel Goldknopf, and there was Moshe Menachem Ehrenstein,
So
and they didn't allow outside people.
They never allowed it. So one time when Menachem Ehrenstein, who was nifta recently, he's a wonderful man, a sweet man, a very good, close friend of my father's. My father's very close with both Leibel Goldknopf, who was the main Ger composer, and Menachem Ehrenstein.
Leibel Goldknopf is the father of Yitzchak Goldknopf, today a
Chaver
Knesset.
Right.
Very close friend of the family.
Tzvi Goldknopf, and they're Bali Tfila and all of that, and Tzvi writes the Nigunim in Ger. Now, but in those days, growing up was Leibel, and I used to go to their house for Kiddush, where we used to go all the time.
Right.
I don't even know how he became friendly with, I guess, when he used to go to Ger. And
Through Ger.
I don't know how and why certain people, but so he was very close with both of these composers. And at that time, Reb Leibel was already nifter. Tzvi, his son, was doing the Nigunim, together with Menachem Ehrenstein, who was a well-known composer. He made hundreds, maybe thousands of songs. He also had albums in Israel that weren't even Ger. He was a very nice person. So I called him. I don't remember how I knew he was in America, and I arranged for him to come down to my music studio, and I played him my father's song, which I did the music for, and I had a Ger choir sing it. And he said, it's very, very nice. So I said, how about giving my father a gift that nobody in the world can give? Can you sing this in Ger? Now, I have to explain to you, like he said, there is no other Ger composer. It's not like anybody comes up with a song. It was only...
no suggestions, nothing.
Right. So it was before the war. There was
Yankel Talmud.
Talmud,
and then afterwards was Leibel Goldknopf, and then afterwards was his son Tzvi, and Menachem partnered up. That was it. There were many, thousands and thousands of people writing songs. It's closed. And he really had a lot of akarsa to my father. And also, it means giving up your spot, your legacy of composing a symphony.
Just to explain, every year they had new compositions. They had a list of compositions, like Menucha, Keloden, Kamelagodo, if it wasn't Shabbos, and
Kaddish.
Zachrenu, Kaddish. Each one had a different style. Each one. Mitzvah Menucha was the first song of the year.
It's the same as Keloden.
Right,
They sang
but same
Keloden
as Keloden.
from Mitzvah Menucha, right.
But Mitzvah Menucha was Slichas Night. That introduced all the New Year's Nigunim. The Rebbe stopped it a few years ago because there were so many Nigunim already. They didn't need to learn. They spent hours and hours learning
the Nigunim.
All the chassidim, you're talking about 10, 20,000 people spending hours. The Rebbe decided he had enough for now. But before that happened...
Yeah, and in those days, they didn't really give out cassettes and tapes, recorders beforehand. So people would come and they would hear the song. Then they would learn it on Shabbos by Keloden, and they would learn the songs. And then by the time, after Sukkot, one of the great experiences of Ger is by then you hear like the certain parts that everybody catches on to, and it becomes very haunting. Everybody hums and sings along with it, and they get to know the songs, and then they would release the music on a cassette afterwards, but not before. So people didn't learn it. They would be listening to it and learning it as it was sung.
Learning it on the spot.
On the spot. And it ended up being that he liked it, and he went into the Ger Rebbe, and you can tell us the way.
Yeah, the Rebbe, of course, like my father. So he asked him, he said, can we use this niggin? So he said, is it a nice niggin? So Menachem Ehrenstein said yes. So he said, okay. He got the approval.
So who told your father the news? Because this probably made your father.
This was
like incredible.
This was a highlight.
He was there in ArtScroll for Slichas that year. He didn't go every year, but he was there that year.
And he knew beforehand that they were going to sing it?
I think so.
Yeah, sure. Tavshin Samach Gimel and Tavshin Samach Vav, again, they allowed also the same
another
thing.
One, another niggin.
Separate, new niggin, also from its own, also a masterpiece. And for my father, he was in Poland before the war by the Imre Emes. He was a little kid. He was up to 10, 11, 12, and he was there. And he saw the Capella, he saw the choir singing by the Imre Emes. And for him to be now, after Ger Hasidus and Polish Jewry was basically decimated, and to watch it regrow into thousands and thousands of people by the Rebbe Shlita, and to stand there while the new choir they have a big choir, maybe 30 strong, are singing his
song.
In front of 10,000 people.
In front of 10,000 people.
Just
Beyond.
incredible accomplishment.
It's there's no words. I mean, I have chills, but for him, this was like, it was just unbelievable. It's not like he came from the music Guerra family or any special whatever. He was just a regular guy, but he was so, in order for this to happen, first of all, you have to be a good musician. You have to compose it. It has to be good.
It really is a
Right.
beautiful niggin. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Hard
It has
to
to
I'm
be
curious,
the
you're
right
talking about
style.
these nigunim. I mean, on one of your Solid Gold albums, you
So that's
recorded
another story, right,
you
Umi
recorded Umi Baladecha, which your father composed.
Right.
But that was the only song that you really composed on any of that you recorded on those albums from him.
No, there was
correct?
another one also.
Rahman.
Oh,
Didn't you do
Rahman.
Rahman?
Right.
A composer for one of my kids from our
Right. He wrote
sisters'
some
wedding.
regular songs also, but Umi Baladecha is a very haunting
Very haunting song
story.
that Mordechai Ben David sings on
right,
that album.
right. How he wrote it.
Solid Gold still available? Is that-
Yes,
A big
Apple
hit.
Music. You want to tell the story how he wrote Umi Baladecha?
No, you go ahead.
So my mother was very not well. She was in the hospital in and out for 2 years, and there was a Shabbos. We were there in the hospital. He was there in the hospital for Shabbos, and he went to daven in a shul, and he started what?
Great story. No, it's
Thank you. So he started davening, and when he got to these words, he just couldn't move on. And he just stood there saying these words, and this melody just came to him with the words, and he just stayed there till the end of.
next thing you realize they were up to laning or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
He was totally entranced.
And he remembered it, which is also very hard.
Right, hey, he
So
remembered.
this was a song that he wrote while my mother was really sick and unfortunately passed away afterwards. And these words just like came from his core. So when I made my first album and I had all different people singing different songs, so I felt that it would be a nice tribute to him. It's a beautiful song, and the number one singer, of course, the king of Jewish music, I asked MBD to sing my father's song, and we have a video of it when I played it to him the first time where he heard it. That was, when you're into music and you compose music, you have a feeling when it's sung, when it's appreciated, and it was a very, very special moment when MBD was singing it and when it was released, and we all sing it. My son just walked down the chuppah to Umi Baladecha.
Almost all the grandchildren walked out to that song, or it's a song at the chuppah.
And it's a good song.
It's a beautiful
Yeah,
song.
beautiful.
By the way, the niggin that he did in Ger
Yeah.
was done at a Haas concert. Years
a
later, right?
symphony.
Yisrael Lamb did
is
a
that right?
symphony arrangement on that niggin.
They called it
12,
the
13
Shoah
niggin.
Symphony.
The Shoah Symphony, right.
Right, and it was a full, in those days, orchestral,
Beautifully,
full
beautifully
orchestra,
arranged.
Wow.
beautifully arranged by Yisrael Lamb. And afterwards, we also had it sung by Mandy Werdiger to the words of Kol
Kaddish,
Mekadesh
my
and
brother
Baruch
arranged
Hashem Yom Yom. And Yisrael Lamb arranged it, actually, and it's.
No, you arranged that it should be done.
Oh yes, I arranged it, and that's a big part of his life. To have it's interesting how many different like talents and qualities
Right,
he had.
facets of his life that he
different
had.
parts,
Right.
yeah.
We didn't even
Sure.
cover all of them.
Yeah, we didn't get to it. Listen, we only have a limited amount of time, but
The first word there is dignity.
yeah,
Oh,
we got to the dignity, the
No,
generosity,
we didn't even get
the
to
wisdom,
the
and the
dignity.
warmth.
I don't think we got to the dignity. You know, I used to
scratched the
travel. Used to
surface. We
travel with
scratched
him
the
to
surface.
Japan.
Well, we're hoping.
He was
yeah.
so respected among the
Right.
Japanese. Think about what this means. We didn't talk about his innovation, his creativity.
Right.
He was 16, 17 years old, living in Shanghai, right? And that's when he developed it. That's where he learned English. He started getting some business acumen there because he was outside the ghetto somehow, and he made some connections in business just to survive. And then he came to America, so he got married when he was in 1949. He was 27, 28 years old. He went back to Japan to do business. Now think of a 27-year-old Jewish Polish guy walking over to Panasonic and Sony, the giants of the world,
In those
and getting the agency for almost every country in Latin America and the country in Israel. We got in the 60s, we were the agents for Israel for 30 years for Panasonic. 30 years, and because the Japanese didn't want to deal directly with the Israelis, so we had an office in Japan. But he was so respected among the Japanese.
He spoke at Sony.
They honored him when
spoke to
the
a bunch
president of Iowa retired from Sony. My father spoke at the dinner. We were invited to Sony or Panasonic family get-togethers, just like Panasonic family, because he was so respected among all the people that we did
He
business
spoke
with.
languages. What's amazing is that he didn't speak like with a Polish accent. And he had a very distinguished American, a little bit European-like accent, but reading, writing, in English
He
fluently.
spoke Japanese and Portuguese and Spanish, French, Italian. He lived in Italy for a few months after they got married, my parents.
It's an unbelievable life story. Like you said, we only scratched the surface.
Right.
There's much more to discuss, but before we wrap up, any final thought that you want to leave the viewers with? People are going to read the book. Both people who knew your father, thought they knew your father, people who don't know your father yet, but will get to know him through this book. Any final thoughts?
I think I could repeat an email I just got 3 days ago from somebody from ArtScroll, a Rosh Yeshiva actually, who had a Telza connection. My father learned in Telz. So, and he wrote, he just asked me, he was thinking about my father. He's one of these people that I didn't realize he felt so close to my father, but he did. And he was telling me, it would be nice to put out a book about your father. And I said, actually, it's coming out this week. We're putting out a book. He said, I'm so excited. I can't wait to buy it because your father is not somebody that was so different, or like you write a book about a Rosh Yeshiva. You have to be a Rosh Yeshiva to live like that. My father was a regular person who worked himself up, right, who lived his life in a certain way with a certain ahava, with dignity, with the wisdom, with the caring about them, the love for people, that he's something that everybody could relate to. He's someone that everyone can relate to. So I think it's going to be a very good lesson for people just how to conduct your life with honesty and integrity.
I told someone there's a handbook on how to be a mensch. That's what this book, among many other things. Yeah. It's a handbook for askonos. It's a handbook for how to be an Oved Hashem.
The things he built, Agudas Yisrael, and his creativity and his vision for the future. We didn't, unfortunately, we didn't touch on that. But when Mir Yeshiva came to America, Reb Nosson Tzvi just took over. When Reb Benny was Nifta Zatzal, Nosson Tzvi Yortai was last week. The first visit, of course, they came to my father. My father said, don't go to my generation. My generation is already stretched out. We've been building, we've been building yeshivas and everything in America. Go to the young generation. He encouraged me to get involved. He encouraged them to go to the alumni. Basically, he taught them the idea of starting an alumni association in America.
He's the president for the alumni.
Right. Whatever. But it was his vision. Everything he was thinking about the future generations. When he went to Ger, he had such nachas watching the growth of the new generations.
The 20 boxes.
Of what?
Reb Nosson Tzvi. That's how.
Oh, that was his idea about building a building. Go ahead, tell him.
Yeah, well, basically that's it.
What was it?
No, they needed a new building, so they had to raise $1 million. So my father said, the way you do it is not, I don't want one person to be involved. You want to have 20 supporters. Go to each person, and each person should get $50,000. You put their name on a plaque.
So you break it down.
I'll give you the first $50,000. Rabbi Yomet Kalbach, Shlita, in ArtScroll tells me this was our first visit to America. We didn't know how to ask for money. We didn't know what we're going to do for money. We didn't know anything. Your father put us, he lifted us up on a pedestal, and he said to the Rosh Yeshiva, don't be shy about going to Mir Yeshiva. You're collecting for a good thing. Mir Yeshiva is a huge thing. Everybody should have the schus to be part of the Mir Yeshiva. He changed their attitude. He gave them such chizuk just because he loved people. It's
truly exceptional. Reb Avi, Reb Dovi, thank you for coming down. I know it's somewhat of an inconvenience to come down.
Pleasure.
But for this book and for your father and for everyone who's going to learn so much from his life story, I thank you for sharing it.
I hope it'll be a big schus for him.
And he should be, I give you a braille, you should be a melitz yosher for both of you, for your families, for your siblings, we didn't mention your sisters, and the extended Fishoff family.
Again, we have to thank Shirley Besser for doing such a beautiful job.
And again, thank you to him for a beautiful book.
And the name, Yahava Benny, is this is my father's gift to today's generation. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.